You are Locked On Mammoth, your daily podcast on the Utah Mammoth, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a special crossover edition of Locked On Wild and Locked On Utah Mammoth, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making both Locked On Wild and Locked On Mammoth your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. With FanDuel, you can get started planning your future bets now. On today's crossover edition of Locked On Wild and Locked On Mammoth, we take a look at a sneaky surprise team that could make big waves. I'm, of course, talking about the Utah Mammoth. We'll take a look as well at Minnesota Wild news and look at where both teams expect to finish in the Central Division. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, and doing a crossover with Robyn Leano for the first time since making the jump to Locked On Mammoth. So, Robyn, officially excited for the Utah Mammoth era, which we saw get underway last year, and a team that through the first half of the season was right up there as far as potential playoff teams. And so my first question for you is we'll start with the Mammoth questions, and in segment 2, I'll let you pick my brain about the Wild. My first question for you is, what do the Mammoth need to kind of further what they have and finish the job and get to the playoffs this season? What do they need to further themselves all the way to a playoff spot?
Well, so I mean that's an interesting question because first of all, I have to say, hey, when you take a look at what this team has already done, they've done a lot to really beef up this team. It's going to be a really hard team for any rookies to come in, by the way, because of how stacked it's now come from top to bottom. But I will say one of the things that has been, at least to me, the things that I have found lacking, and it's not by fault of their own from last season. It's mainly because of, hey, they were injured like insane last year. I think they went through 10 defensemen deep. So that's what I'm going through. Looking at that defense, like they needed to find something that worked. Because Sean Dursey was out for half the season. John Marino was out for half the season. So they tried to fix that by bringing in Oli Mata, by bringing in Nick DeSimone, by bringing in a couple other guys, and they're doing that. You know, they're trying to shore up a little bit more and find those guys, find some veteran presence. They picked up Nate Schmidt over this offseason. But to me, it still is a lot to be seen. I would love to see Mikhail Sergachev fix some of his issues. And by issues, I mean not having to force stretch passes down the middle and all of a sudden creating a turnover to like a 3-on-1 scenario. Those are the kinds of things I'm looking for this team.
We did see Kirill Vejmelka end up being, by the end of the season, the number one for the Utah Mammoth. And, you know, he had a great season, 26 wins, 2.58 goals against average. Is he the guy going forward? Are you confident in him being the true number one, or is this goaltending position still like it's in good shape right now? But is Vejmelka truly like the ace franchise goalie that can lead this team going forward?
It certainly seems like to be that he is the guy. Utah has given him all the confidence, especially down the stretch there when they were trying to make a push to get back into a playoff spot. I think they ended up starting Vejmelka. I want to say it was like 18, maybe even 20 straight games in a row. It was insane. It was an incredible amount of games that they started him in a row before they finally started to put in a backup goalie, which was, you know, I would say a valid reason at the time, where Connor Ingram out for an indefinite period of time, still going to be out for an indefinite period of time as he still seeks help from the player assistance program. So Utah had to find guys like like Jackson Stauber or Matt Villalta, who are coming from Tucson Roadrunners at the time, and they didn't have the confidence in them yet to do that, so they gave all those minutes to Vejmelka, and it seems that they're going to continue that trend. They have a backup in place, but it seems that all eyes are going to be on Kirill Vejmelka to be able to continue that trend.
Let's talk a little bit about Logan Cooley, who had a 30-goal season this past year and just looks the part. He looks poised to truly ascend to that elite player territory and become one of the bright players in this league. I should clarify as well as Clayton Keller that had the 30 goals, but Logan Cooley had 25, still very impressive. But question still stands: just how good can a player like Logan Cooley become for this Mammoth team?
I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say it to you, for everyone to hear. Logan Cooley is set up to be a franchise player. I mean, he is absolutely phenomenal. He is going to be that guy, elite kind of player, going to be the superstar for the team, and just who in a very short amount of period of time. I mean, he's already close. He's already a star player. He's just going to be very close to getting to that superstar status there. And it's going to be reflected when like as contract negotiations, by the way, are going in place for Logan Cooley. He's got one more year on his deal, trying to figure out it's the expiration of his rookie contract. So it's okay. What are you going to do now past this from that entry level deal? How much are you going to be worth? How long are you going to do that? And the number is surely going to show that they have all the confidence that this guy is going to be the best player on the team. And going to be the cornerstone player for the franchise.
You mentioned bringing in St. Cloud, Minnesota legend Nate Schmidt to kind of fill out the back end of that decor. A player who just finished up a Stanley Cup trophy run with the Florida Panthers and showed that he still has plenty left in the tank. And for a group that, it's a mostly young team, but you look at that decor and they've got plenty of veteran players on that. Just how big of an addition was it to get Nate Schmidt to bring in some of that Stanley Cup pedigree to kind of help be one of the veteran leaders on this group?
I think it's huge. I've talked about what the defense was lacking in the past, and they kind of were going through a lot of fundamental errors. They needed some veteran presence out back. That's for one. But two is Utah's in a position where they want to be able to compete, and they want to be able to have that level of a winning pedigree on their team, and to understand this is what it takes to win. This is what it takes to make it into the playoffs and make a run into to the Stanley Cup. And I'm not saying the rookie defensemen or anybody like that aren't that, but I mean, you take a look that Nate Schmidt has the proven track record. I mean, you just kind of have to have someone who fills in that gap while those younger guys, and by the way, those younger guys I'm going to mention as Dmitry Shemishev and Maverick Lamoureux, cook a little bit more in the minor leagues to be able to kind of get the understanding of what it means to be a top defenseman and in North American hockey.
Final one before we head to a break here, Robyn. Gotta ask about JJ Peterka, one of the big acquisitions of the offseason. Were you surprised that Buffalo ended up, there were rumors about so many different offers out on the table. I know Marco Rossi was floated as a potential player to acquire in the deal, and Buffalo said no to that one. There were also some rumors that Jordan Kyrou was potentially available as part of a package for Peterka. So were you surprised that the Mammoth ended up being the winners of that sweepstakes? And what can Peterka bring to this Mammoth offense and roster in general?
It's absolutely incredible because I'll tell you this. About a week before, maybe it was even less than a week before the deal happened, Tom was he was running a solo show at the time. I had something to take care of. And he was talking about what Utah can do as a trade partner with Buffalo. And he kind of brought up a lot of different things, brought up the idea, maybe you chase after and see if you can get Tage Thompson, if you can get this player or that player. JJ Peterka was also put in there because there was a conversation that both Tom and I had earlier about going for an offer sheet for JJ Peterka to be able to see if it's like, hey, this is a guy you want in your team. He got an incredible offensive prowess. You can add to your top six, who can really bolster up the wings and help maybe be a good winger to essentially, if you could have a second line winger as an example, to be on that wing alongside Barrett Hayton, that would be huge. So when the trade happened, to me, I thought, oh, this is actually, to me, I think it's more worth it. They're not having to give up a crazy amount of draft picks because you're not having to do whatever that value would have been from the for that dollar value with the contract they ended up giving him, plus also the risk of matching or anything like that. So it's like, okay, we got it. We got the trade in. Yeah, okay. Utah lost defenseman Michael Kesselring and a supposed very big, huge fan favorite in Josh Doan. But I think when you look at the trade-off there, you're bringing in a guy who just has that level to be a really good top six forward.
Yeah, I'm a little envious. I know the Wild were heavily pursuing Mr. Peterka, and ultimately Buffalo went the way that they did. And I guess Wild fans just have to hope that Buffalo continues to be bad, so maybe they can pry Tage Thompson away. That's at least what I'm telling myself. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we will discuss the Minnesota Wild. I'm sure Robyn has plenty of questions regarding Kirill Kaprizov, Marco Rossi, and more. So we'll talk a little Minnesota Wild as we continue the special crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Mammoth right after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild and Locked on Mammoth is brought to you by FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or are ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. You can take a flyer on, for instance, for Minnesota Vikings fans, Justin Jefferson to win the MVP race. You could pick the Vikings to win the NFC North. Or you can go all the way to the Super Bowl and who you think will win. The options are endless. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Because FanDuel Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to today's special crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Mammoth. Again, we are your team each and every day, and we thank you for listening to both shows all off season long. The season's getting closer, so don't worry. We will have NHL hockey for you before you know it, and the best way to stay up to date on both the Mammoth and the Wild is to make sure to subscribe to both shows so you never miss out on any new episodes. All right, Robyn, I like to think of myself as an open book. So if you have any Minnesota Wild burning questions, go ahead. I am ready.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing, and you kind of already teased it already before we went in there, is the biggest fruit out there, the biggest question is what is going on with Kirill Kaprizov, because I know he's got to be in the middle of some contract negotiations as well.
Yeah, there hasn't been a ton that has happened as of yet, mainly because Kirill Kaprizov has been using the offseason as the offseason. He's been doing some training recently with Evgeny Malkin, so that was fun to see on social media. He's been just having a time of it in Europe, and I know Bill Guerin has also been taking some time off here in the offseason. He's been gearing up preparations for the Olympic team. So there's a lot going on. And from what I have gathered, both sides have exchanged some figures as far as the contract goes. But it is expected that the talks will ramp up in earnest once Kaprizov comes to North America to gear up for the season. The Wild don't want to let this drag on any more than it needs to. The Wilds are very keen on making Kirill Kaprizov their franchise player, the face of the franchise, and paying him accordingly. Wild owner Craig Leopold has been on record multiple times saying nobody's going to offer more money than we are. And he's right. The Wild can, in theory, offer the most money of any team that would be in this. Kirill loves Minnesota. Minnesota loves him as well. And I think I think of the two outcomes here, either overpaying Kirill a little bit based on what he's worth or not paying him at all. I feel like not paying him at all is infinitely more of a problem than paying him. If he's worth $13.5, $14 million a year as a player based on his production, paying him 15 and a half, I feel like it's infinitely worse if they let him leave as opposed to a slight overpay. So I don't think there's a number that the Wild are really uncomfortable with. And at this point, it just kind of comes down to the term. Obviously, Kaprizov has missed some games throughout the course of his career. He missed 41 of them this past season. So there's a little injury concern with this as well, but I don't get the sense that the Wild want this to drag on any more than it needs to. Once he gets to Minnesota, once both sides have a chance to talk face to face, I'll be shocked if this isn't done within about, 2-3 days time of that happening.
Another question that I had in kind of going in my head is thinking about now the quote fallout of the retirement of one goaltender, Marc-Andre Fleury. What's the goaltending situation now look like for Minnesota? What's the backup situation? What's next for them?
It's a great question because Marc-Andre Fleury has played not only on the ice, but off the ice. He's played a pretty pivotal role for this team since he was acquired from Chicago. He's been a major veteran presence in the locker room, and I don't think it's going to be super easy to fill that void this upcoming season. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a hit taken there. Thankfully, the Wild do have a player that I have been fully behind as a franchise goalie in Philip Gustafsson, because he's been inside the top 10 in every goalie statistic since he came to Minnesota and has become more of a regular starter. So I'm not worried about him taking his usual 50, 55 games this season, but the backup position is going to be a big question mark. The Wild have Jesper Wallstedt in the system, who is widely expected to be kind of the next guy, but he did not have a great season this past year. He battled injuries. He was told at the beginning of the season, hey, you're going to come with the team. We're going to do a 3 goalie thing. So get yourself an apartment in St. Paul because you're going to be here to stay. And he was with the team for like 6 games. So there was the mental side of things too. That obviously is a tough pill to swallow for a young player who's basically told, like, you're going to be with the NHL roster, and then all of a sudden isn't. That's frustrating. So he's expected to be the number 2, but there is some risk there. So the Wild did sign Cal Peterson as kind of organizational depth. And basically they phrased it like this to Jesper. All you got to do to make the roster is beat Cal Peterson out for a job. If he can do that, he'll be the number 2, no question. If he can't, then there are a bunch of questions that come with that backup position, because no offense to Cal Peterson, but he did not play in the NHL at all last year. And I don't think he was brought in with the design of him being the backup goalie. I think he was brought in as a pure emergency guy, and it's Jesper's job to lose. I think he will win it. You've got a little bit of a younger goalie room between the two, but I think once Jesper gets comfortable, I think that goalie room is going to be similar to what Boston had with Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. We could be talking that good when it gets going.
You're always gonna love here goals, like little goalie development there, right? Those are always the best. I love hearing those. But I guess another thing too is one of the things Tom and I watched pretty heavily as we were talking Central Division for quite a while. We'll get more into Central Division in a little bit too, but seeing what happened to the Minnesota Wild in that second half of the season, post January, everything seemed to have fallen down on their side. In your eyes, this off season, has Minnesota done anything to address what happened, and maybe added any players, did any subtractions? What changes have they made to, let's say, maybe avoid that happening? Because they were top 3 in the division for a while.
Yeah, they were in the top 3 for a good part of the beginning of the season. They had the most points in the NHL in the early part of December. So they were playing fantastically to start the season, and then the injuries just started to mount, and it was tough for them to consistently win games with 4 or 5 players out of the lineup at once. The Wilds, they have tried to put themselves in position, I think, for a big splash at the trade deadline. They dabbled in free agency this offseason, but so many players just returned to where they were at, or in the case of Mitch Marner, signed massive deals that the Wild just were never going to give out. So they made a couple of additions. They brought in Vladimir Tarasenko, who had a down year with the Detroit Red Wings, but I don't think that was a good fit. I don't think player and team were a good fit in that situation. So I'm really intrigued to see if he just has kind of started to lose a step, or if he gets a better opportunity here and can get back to the production that he's had throughout his career. He'll be, at least to start the year, on the second line. And I think that's the biggest need for that second line, was somebody that could come in and be a true shooter. So I think it certainly has the potential to work. You bring in Nico Sturm as well. And I know Nico Sturm is a 4th line center at this point in his career, but he is a 2-time Stanley Cup winner, and he is a 4th line center. With all the injuries the Wild have dealt with the last couple of seasons, they have had plenty of players in that 4th line that are not NHL guys, that are more AHL depth pieces that can give you a couple games in a pinch. But if you're playing them 40 games a season, you're in trouble. So bringing him in to shore up that 4th line and to be just that is, I think, going to have a big impact as well. But the Wild are just hoping that Kirill Kaprizov doesn't miss 40 games this year, that Joel Eriksson Ek plays more than 43 games, and the other 9 players on the roster that played 60 or fewer games this year, they're hoping those guys are closer to 70 games than they were this past year. And if they don't have just insanely unlucky injuries throughout the course of the year, I think they will hit that. And then if they're in position to really make a run at the deadline, they're going to go make a big splash. And Wild fans have been waiting for this for a while, for Bill Guerin to have the financial flexibility to actually do it. And if they play it right, I think they'll make a big add at the trade deadline.
Well, Seth, I think one thing we can do is we can kind of use some of that knowledge to help kind of decide what the Central Division is going to look like. Actually, we can probably we can go ahead and talk about that. Talk about how competitive it's going to be, because I think everyone wants to talk about the Central Division this year. So we can do that right after this. And today's episode brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your businesses need to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I know I've had several friends out there who are hiring managers. They've told me how stressful it can be when it comes to trying to find the right person for their job. Every day without it is like a setback to them. That's exactly when Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up that hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show, saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Final segment of today's special crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Mammoth. Once again, we thank you for making both shows your first listen each and every day. Robyn, let's talk about that Central Division. And we know over the last couple of years, it's been the usual suspects in those top three spots, whether it be Colorado, Dallas, or Winnipeg. Those have been the three that have most commonly occupied those top three spots in the Central. So before we take a look at where each of our teams are going to fit in, I ask you this question. Which team do you think is most likely to fall out of the top three this year?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's a tough. I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, to me, I have a huge question of how much Dallas can sustain their strength. I mean, they've been a strong team for a while, and now with the whole, I guess, with the fallout surrounding Peter DeBoer, and just, I'd say, I guess, yeah, fallout's the right term, I'd say, is how much can they sustain it now that that's kind of settling out? That to me, that's the huge question. Maybe they're still a playoff team, but I don't know if they'll stand to the top three this year.
Yeah, I'm on the same wavelength because you lose like Winnipeg is an interesting case, losing Nikolai Ehlers and replacing him with Gustav Nyquist and Jonathan Toews. I was like, who is the second player? Jonathan Toews, who has not been in the NHL for the last 2 seasons. That's an interesting one. The Jets will still have Connor Hellebuck, but like it just everything that went down after that that loss by the Stars, in which DeBoer threw Jake Ottinger under the bus. Everything since then has been negative. Like every single thing going on with the Stars has been negative. And you lost a couple of key pieces. You have a very unclear picture as to what's going to happen with Jason Robertson. Like, it seems pretty likely that he's going to get traded, and that's a big piece too. And now you've got a coach who has some experience at the NHL level, but has never gotten a team out of round one in the instances in which he's made the playoffs. So that's a huge piece that is kind of unsettled. And that is not nothing. So if I were to rank them, and I kind of go back and forth on this, but I feel like Colorado's at number 3. Like, I think they are the safest of the 3 to stay in. And then I guess depending on what day I get asked, I feel like Dallas or Winnipeg could be the ones that, some days I'm like, well, it's Winnipeg because Connor Hellebuck, he can't do that again. And then some days it's like Dallas they've got a lot of uncertainty behind the bench. So I think it will be one of those two. I'll just, and of course, doing this now, it's going to come back to bite me. I will just go ahead and say that Colorado is safe, and that if there's a team that's going to fall out, it's going to be Dallas or Winnipeg.
And that's certainly fair. And I with you on that reasoning. I guess at this moment I'm leaning a little bit more towards Dallas. And you're right, there is still a lot of that uncertainty with Jonathan Toews on Winnipeg and all that. But I mean, and you don't know if Connor Hellebuck can repeat what he just did, but at the same time, I mean, Connor Hellebuck has to prove himself to be one of, if not the best goaltender in the National Hockey League right now. Like, he's incredible.
He's incredible. He's doing things that you haven't seen from goalies in quite some time. But it is interesting, every time we get to the end of the season and go to the postseason, like his postseason numbers are just, they're not great. And I think a lot of that has to do with Winnipeg riding him as much as they can and being like, we'll deal with the consequences later.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely. And two, you brought up a point that I think is absolutely important, because this is something that some fans from Locked On Mammoth have heard Tom and I talk about among the Mammoth side of things and the Utah hockey side of things. Towards the end there, like I said, they rode Kirill Vejmelka for 20 straight games down the road there while trying to push for the playoffs, and you could see he was trying to burn out. And to me, like, goaltending management is absolutely crucial when it comes to getting into these into high stakes, very important games down the stretch here.
Oh yeah, you can't. Like, think about the number of times that he started 60 plus games. It's like, and now you look at the numbers that he's putting up, and they're still good, but his numbers have very clearly dipped. And I think a lot of it is because of the usage and just not having. I couldn't even tell you who the Lightning's backup goalie has been over the last few years. I'm not convinced that they actually had one. But that, like, if you have a good backup, that takes a little bit of pressure off the starter and allows you to, especially at the end of the season, if you have the luxury of having everything wrapped up, allows you to just build in a couple of breaks. Because guess what? Once you get to the postseason, you're only starting the one guy unless you're the Jets and Connor Hellebuyck gets pulled every other game. Usage.
Very important.
Robyn, let's talk about our teams a little bit here. I'll start with the Wild, because I have kind of, I did lay out right before we took the second break, kind of what the Wild are expecting, why they're expecting to have a better year, and a lot of it comes down to the injuries. And I think if they get more games played simply from the usual suspects, you're talking about a team that in early December, they had the most points in the league. I think if they even get 65 games from Kirill Kaprizov, I think they would be a top 3 for sure. Easy. They might even be a top 2. He was playing that well. And once he got hurt, that just kind of derailed everything. Which is why I think if he plays 65 or 70 games this year, I think the Wild they're a pretty big lock for at least the 3rd seed in the Central Division. And so I think that's kind of my baseline as far as like your expectations for the season. I'm putting them at the 3rd spot. They will beat my expectations if they get higher than that. I'll probably be a little disappointed if they finish as one of the 2 wildcard teams, unless something like a major injury happens that they have to overcome all season. And said this every year since 2015. How about we get out of the first round for a change?
Yeah, it's always a nice thing, right? I mean, yeah. As someone who used to follow a team who's been notorious for they would make runs, but they'd also be like towards the end, their first round exits like crazy. I'm like, it's just stressful. Like, stressful is crazy. And I'm like, okay, it's enough. And then, of course, I ended up covering the Arizona Coyotes, who barely made the playoffs once during my tenure covering the Arizona Coyotes, and now covering the Utah Mammoth here. They're going to be in a prime spot this year to finally do it. And Seth, I'll tell you, Tom and I have been using this term, and it's crazy because I don't think we're using it lightly. Is saying that it's like a playoff or bust kind of scenario, where this team on paper has put so much into the talent, so much into the roster. Bill Armstrong is finally getting a lot of these guys to come to fruition. And they've had glimpses in the last couple of years, like their last year in Arizona and last year they had glimpses, first year in Utah, of being a close to playoff team. They've seen all the things they need to fix. They're tweaking those issues. To me, I think the acquisition of JJ Peterka, bringing in a Nate Schmidt, bringing in a Brandon Tanev, those guys are going to be crucial to this kind of run for the Mammoth to be, at the very least, the second wild card spot. Like I said, it is like a playoff bust, or like playoff or bust kind of scenario where, to me, Andre Toriani is on the hot seat. I feel like, don't make the playoffs, I do not think he will be around for much longer.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did an episode recently where I ranked the Central Division coaches with my my Monday guest, and I put John Hines number 7 and Andre Tourney 8, largely because of the lack of postseason success. And I feel like those are the two guys in the Central Division that would benefit the most from a series win, or in the case of Tourney, a playoff appearance.
I have used this phrasing multiple times, Seth, and I think it's really important, is saying that Andre Tourney was the right coach at the time when he was hired by Arizona to kind of get this team into the rebuild scenario, coach the young guys, because that's what he was done. He was the head coach of the Ottawa 67s in the OHL. He knows how the young player's mind works, and he knows how to develop them. His role in that has done a great job, and he's done an incredible job as a coach up until this point. But there seems to be a lacking gap to get to that playoff spot. And I think he'll still do it this year. But if he doesn't, like I said, I feel like that the runway for him would be very short, especially. And I'll put this out there, as Tom and I have teased a couple of times over the off season with the Utah Mammoth owner and John Cooper having a very friendly golf relationship.
Okay, that is very interesting.
It seems to me that seems well documented. So if there's anything going to be ever change, I would look maybe John Cooper as a coach in the next couple of years or so.
Wow. Well, that certainly gives us something to think about here throughout the course of this season. But it's going to be fun to see how things play out for both of these teams, which is why, listeners, your best way to stay up to date on both the Utah Mammoth and the Minnesota Wild is by following Locked On Mammoth and Locked On Wild wherever you listen to your podcasts. We've got you covered all offseason, all regular season, and hopefully all playoffs long too. So again, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We have you covered all offseason and regular season long. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and your team every day.